We know we need the private sector for its innovation power, resources, and expertise to tackle some of the most wicked SDG challenges. We also know that we need to work together and in partnerships to overcome these SDG challenges. However, engaging the private sector in development, cooperation, and multi-stakeholder partnerships is not without its challenges. These can include lack of safeguards on the use of public resources, insufficient attention to concrete results and outcomes for those left behind, and limited transparency, accountability, and evaluation of projects and programs with the private sector. To tackle these issues, the Global Partnership launched the Kampala Principle for Effective Private Sector Engagement in Development Cooperation in 2019. The principles provide a new blueprint for making private sector partnerships more effective, which in turn leads to greater impact for sustainable development and the SDGs. The Kampala Principles address key challenges and opportunities for better country ownership, fostering trust, inclusiveness, and mutual benefits, increased transparency and accountability, and a stronger focus on risk-sharing approaches that can help reach those furthest behind. With the Kampala Principles, we ensure that when we use public resources to engage with the private sector, we do so in a way that creates both economic value for businesses and social value for society. A win-win situation. We know we need the private sector for its innovation power, resources, and expertise to tackle some of the most wicked SDG challenges. We also know that we need to work together and in partnerships to overcome these SDG challenges. However, engaging the private sector in development, cooperation, and multi-stakeholder partnerships is not without its challenges. These can include lack of safeguards on the use of public resources, insufficient attention to concrete results and outcomes for those left behind, and limited transparency, accountability, and evaluation of projects and programs with the private sector. To tackle these issues, the Global Partnership launched the Kampala Principle for Effective Private Sector Engagement in Development Cooperation in 2019. The principles provide a new blueprint for making private sector partnerships more effective, which in turn leads to greater impact for sustainable development and the SDGs. The Kampala Principles address key challenges and opportunities for better country ownership, fostering trust, inclusiveness, and mutual benefits, increased transparency and accountability, and a stronger focus on risk-sharing approaches that can help reach those furthest behind. With the Kampala Principles, we ensure that when we use public resources to engage with the private sector, we do so in a way that creates both economic value for businesses and social value for society. A win-win situation.
Good morning, Indonesia, esteemed panelists and participants. My name is Kim Betcher, Director of Policy and Program Learning at the Center for International Private Enterprise in Washington, D.C. It is my pleasure to welcome you to today's session on implementing the Kampala Principles in Indonesia and on better understanding perspectives of companies from Indonesia on business practice in the context of development cooperation partnerships. The Kampala Principles are a set of 5 mutually reinforcing principles that are meant to enhance the effectiveness of development partnerships with the private sector at the country level. The principles were designed by and for the business community, governments in developing countries, and their development partners or donors, civil society, trade unions, and other stakeholders, and were launched by the Global Partnership for Effective Development Cooperation at its senior level meeting in July 2019. Slide, please. I would like to recognize the hosts for today's event. First, the Global Partnership for Effective Development Cooperation, which is the primary multi-stakeholder vehicle for driving development effectiveness, to maximize the effectiveness of all forms of cooperation for development for the shared benefits of people, planet, prosperity, and peace. and Business Call to Action, a global inclusive business platform advancing core business solutions for development to accelerate progress toward the Sustainable Development Goals, and the United Nations Development Program. These organizations, with the support of the German Federal Ministry for Economic Cooperation and Development, BMZ, and the German Development Agency, GIZ, are coordinating today a consultation process to encourage the uptake of the Kampala principles at the country level. Next slide. Today's session aims are, first, to introduce the Kampala principles to you and explain why they matter. Next, we seek to understand what drives companies in Indonesia to engage in development cooperation partnerships and to discuss what is needed from all actors to improve the effectiveness of development cooperation, multi-stakeholder partnerships involving the private sector. Your input today is really important. It will inform best practices in the Kampala Principles Implementation Toolkit. It will inform the flagship monitoring framework of the global partnership, and I hope it will inspire new champions of the principles in Indonesia. Slide, please. For the first part of this session, which I am moderating, we will start by welcoming Mr. Norimasa Shimomura, UNDP Indonesia resident representative, to set the tone for this action dialogue on private sector engagement. Then we will hear from Dr. Uta Bulhoff, Deputy Director General at the Ministry of Economic Cooperation and Development, BMZ, in Germany, who will share with us an introduction to the Kampala principles. In the remainder of part one, we will have a panel discussion with perspectives from government, private sector, civil society, development partner, and a multi-stakeholder alliance. Following, in the second part of the session, we will open it up. We'll be hearing an example of business implementing the Kampala principles and open up the floor to you, to companies and other stakeholders with us today to share and discuss your perspectives on the implementation of the Kampala principles and business practices. For opening remarks, we have with us today Mr. Norimasa Shimomura, UNDP resident representative. He has many years promoting sustainable human development in many countries, including Kazakhstan, Georgia, Western Balkans, and other places. He's been resident representative in Indonesia since 2020. Thank you, Norimasa-san, for joining us. Please, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Mr. Kim Betcher, Director of Policy Program Learning Center for International Private Enterprise. Ms. Uta Belhoff, Deputy Director General, German Federal Ministry for Economic Cooperation and Development. Great to see you. Mr. Wisnu Tomo, Director of Foreign Policy and International Development Cooperation from the Ministry of National Development Planning, Bappenas, Indonesia. Mr. Yaya Junardi, President of Indonesia's Global Compact Network. Mr. Steve Tipman, President and CEO of Trade Facilitation Office from Canada. Ms. Maria Dian Nurani, Head of Socioeconomic Standing Committee, Indonesian Chamber of Commerce and Industry. Ms. Rita Triharyani, Head of Inclusive Training Center and Service Learning Unit, and everyone else. Good morning from Jakarta and greetings. I am really delighted to be here today on behalf of UNDP in Indonesia. Please allow me to convey my gratitude to the Global Partnership for Effective Development Cooperation, Germany, and the Business Call to Action for engaging my office to co-host this discussion. Today's event is part of UNDP's global endeavor to build a more inclusive business architecture for achieving the Sustainable Development Goals. We're now in a very precarious moment with less than 8 years to go before 2030. Indonesia has made tremendous progress towards achieving the SDGs, and yet substantial challenges remain, particularly with the negative effects of the COVID-19 pandemic. And such a circumstance calls for a stronger solidarity, a collective action and collaborative partnership for achieving the SDGs, particularly with the private sector, both as enabler and beneficiary. While SDGs cannot be achieved without the active contributions of the private sector, the opposite is also true, that private sector would not be able to continue to operate much longer without the SDGs that can bring about stable and disaster-free enabling environment for businesses to sustain. Consumer preference and global market demand is rapidly advancing also. Old way of doing business that is built on unsustainable consumption and production patterns is a surest way to go out of business in the near future. The government of Indonesia has demonstrated seriousness towards the SDGs, especially in eradicating poverty and improving health and education. However, given the sheer ambition of the SDGs, no government alone can bear the burden, particularly when it comes to financing. And as such, the government has actively sought for means to redirect private capital from circulating in the brown economy to transitioning towards green economy. Bappenas has taken the lead, working closely with us, the United Nations, to formulate the Integrated National Financing Framework, or INFF, for Indonesia exactly for this purpose. The government has also worked with the UN to introduce tangible financial instruments, such as the SDG bond that was issued last year, and continues to work on blue bond, municipal bonds, and facilitates the creation of private impact investment fund. The government of Indonesia has consistently advocated for financing sustainable development. Most recently, at the first meeting of G20 Development Working Group last month, at which Minister Suharto Monarfa of Bappenas stressed the importance of boosting private sector participation and blended financing in critical development projects, particularly in the underdeveloped parts of this vast archipelagic country. Ladies and gentlemen, Kampala principles offer foundation for private sector engagement in achieving the SDGs. They consist of 5 core ideas, as we just saw the video, designed to ensure a more effective, transparent, inclusive, and well-targeted collaboration with the private sector that leaves no one behind. The Kampala principles were launched by the Global Partnership for Effective Development Cooperation as a way to bolster public-private partnership for SDGs. It heartens me to see each and every one of you from the private sector and civil society to have joined our first gathering of Kampala principles today here in Indonesia. Our colleagues at the UNDP headquarters and Business Call to Action, together with the OECD, have worked with Germany in the development and rollout of the Kampala principles on effective private sector engagement in development cooperation. And I'm very pleased that we are now bringing these principles to the Indonesian context. Your interest and input will help us develop an action plan to bolster a meaningful private sector engagement for achieving the SDGs here in Indonesia. The private sector is known for its energy, creativity, and innovation. We need to see that dynamism today in order to keep this conversation on Kampala principles going and to translate them into action and real results. Today, we have panelists from the government, civil society, and private sector to discuss their roles and commitments to implement the Kampala principles. The insights gathered today will be used to draft the Kampala Principles Toolkit, which later will serve as a basis for private sector engagement in development cooperation. So I look forward to hearing views from the private sector participants and all of you on how we can best collaborate to achieve our common vision, the SDGs. I wish all of us a fruitful discussion. Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you, Nordmasa, for setting the stage for our discussion and really helping us understand where it fits in global frameworks and the interdependencies of us all. Now I will turn to Dr. Uta Bulhoff, who really has been a champion of the Kampala principles from the start. She began her career in the private sector with McKinsey, has worked for many years on humanitarian aid and development, lived in interesting places like Palestine, Pakistan, and Egypt, and has worked her way up through the German government and is now a Deputy Director General at the Ministry of Economic Cooperation and Development. Uta, I hope you're doing well. Please explain the principles to us.
Good morning, Kim. Good morning, colleagues. It's great to be with you. It's a very early morning session for me here in Germany, but I'm, delighted to be with you, particularly because, as you rightly said, Kim, I have been leading Germany's work with the Global Partnership for Effective Development Cooperation and the Kampala Principles in particular over the last couple of years. I just recently, and it's a very few days only, joined UNICEF. So this is the latest news here, but, my heart and being still, a civil servant on leave is of course with us. So I would like to use this opportunity with colleagues from our dear cooperation partner BAPENAS, UNDP, colleagues from civil society and private sector to, first of all, dive a little bit into the history of the Kampala Principles, then explain the Kampala Principles briefly, and give thirdly an outlook on where we're heading to, and hopefully that gets us a good start into the discussion. Slide, please. As we have seen in our discussions, the origin of the Kampala Principles were in the second high-level meeting in Nairobi of the GPDC, where, we came across in the heels of the 2015 agreement and the SDGs going forward that we really have to rethink the role of the private sector in development cooperation and SDG financing. So we analyzed, with the help of OECD and UNDP colleagues, 900 development projects with the private sector. And we found that in particular, only 5% of the projects explicitly referred to rural, remote, or underserved locations. And only 17% of projects included a project-specific monitoring framework. So just to give you a few examples, and these were kind of, concerning us and led us to an intense consultation among all partners being involved in development to really set new standards and new norms, how ideally we could work together and leverage the potential of the private sector, as well as clarifying the roles of development partners and donors as well, how to best work together going forward. And I would like to echo what Kim, as well as the UNDP representative just said. This was an inclusive consultation, and it was then finalized in the senior level meeting in 2019 of the GPDC. Diving quickly into the 5 principles, it is very important to see that these principles are interlinked, interconnected, they are mutually reinforcing each other, and they are also structured in a way that they have sub-principles, which are elaborated in detail, on the website effectivecooperation.org. But to give you a little bit of glimpse on the principle 1, one, inclusive country ownership, which is a very important one, and I'm sure it will be addressed from our distinguished panelists in a second. It's very much about the alignment on where the private sector should come in, agreeing on a policy framework that is explicit about the role of the private sector in delivering national and sectoral development priorities in line with the Agenda 2030. Principle 2 is very much about agreeing on a results framework and the targets that should be achieved by all partners through this cooperation. Principle 3 is very much about ensuring that the entire collaboration is done through an inclusive partnership, meaning an inclusive dialogue and consultation through development cooperation and other partners. It is very important that inclusive bottom-up and innovative partnerships are built, and that awareness is risen on engagement opportunities. Principle 4, transparency and accountability. It's very much about disseminating, measuring sustainable development results for learning and scaling up of successes. And last but not least, which I think is very important, is a principle 5 on leave no one behind. It's often discussed these days, and even more important also now facing the backlash of the COVID crisis, is that also the private sector work on development has to stress and has to address those who are left behind. And it's very much in this regard that we have to recognize the risks that are adjacent for the private sector to work in these areas, and also how we can best share and mitigate risks for all partners in ensuring that those who are in need and are left behind are met going forward. So as you can see, these principles are kind of complementary to the effectiveness development principles, but they're in particular meant to really harness the potential of the private sector through development cooperation, by everybody taking its role. Let's finish with a short outlook on what's happening next. We are currently in the process of preparing a detailed case studies on the Kampala principle, so showcasing the results of the Kampala principles. We will hear today from a case study in Bangladesh, which I'm very proud of. And we will also hear a little bit about the toolkit, Kampala Principles Toolkit, that is currently being designed to then help everybody on the ground to implement the Kampala Principles. And the work that we have been doing over the last couple of years is also being part and center of the update of the monitoring reform to measure and assess the work of the partners to include the private sector more effectively into the development of countries going forward. So this is it for now. I hope this will get us a good start into the discussion. And as said, Germany is very much committed and is very much looking forward to continue its work with the GPDC, in particular on strengthening the role of the private sector within development and through development cooperation. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Uta, for explaining the principles to us, and indeed why they are so essential to reframing and strengthening partnerships with the private sector for the 2030 agenda. We turn now to our panel, where we have a variety of perspectives, experience, insights. And the purpose of this is to understand more the role of the private sector and in development cooperation, why other actors are getting involved with the private sector, What are the benefits? What are the challenges and lessons? And then looking at the Kampala principles, what needs to improve? What are the priorities? And what steps can each of us take in our sectors? We have on our panel, we start with Dr. Wisnu Otomu, who is the Director for Foreign Policy and International Development Cooperation at the Ministry of National Development Planning, Bappenas. He earned his doctoral degree in public administration from the University of Gadjah Mada. Unfortunately, Dr. Utomo is unable to join the session today, and his remarks will be shared by his colleague, Mr. Priyanto Ramatula, Coordinator of Global Development Cooperation in Bappenas. From Indonesia Global Compact Network, we have Yaya Junardi, who's the president, and he's also President Commissioner of PT Rajawali Corporation, a diversified investment company. He has experience as CEO of Excelcom, a mobile telecom, with Bentel and IBM, and has been on the boards of multiple institutes and foundations. He is an author of articles on sustainable development goals, and in 2016 was a gold medal winner of the Global Business and Interfaith Peace Award in Brazil. From the civil society, we have Ms. Rita Triharyani, head of Inclusive Training Center, Yakum Rehabilitation Center. She's an inclusion specialist, has lots of experience working with inclusive hospitals, helping people with disabilities to enter employment, and assisting companies to provide accommodation for employees with disabilities. And goes on, innovations in agriculture. And particularly of note, she was a national consultant to the Voluntary National Review of 2030, looking at the impacts of the COVID-19 pandemic. In the private sector, from the Chamber of Commerce, Kadin, we have Ms. Maria Dian-Urani, who is a certified sustainability professional. She is vice head of the Social Responsibility Committee at Kadin. She has had a significant role in development of standards such as the ISO 26000 standard for social responsibility and the Indonesian standard, and is author of a book on Towards Sustainable Business, Practical Guidelines on CSR Implementation. And we have Mr. Steve Titman from Canada, my country, from TFO Canada, the Trade Facilitation Office, has experience in both private and nonprofit sectors, 25 years of experience, much of it in international trade and development, and has also been Vice President of CARE Canada. Thank you to all of our panelists. I would like to begin the conversation with Bappenas, with Mr. Priyanto Ramatula, and I'm interested in how you see the role of the private sector. You know, what's your picture from the government side in terms of priorities and frameworks, and what needs work? Mr. Priyanto, please.
Yes, yeah, thank you, moderator. So, Honorable Mr. Shimomura and Ibu Uta from BNZ, also our colleagues from UNDP, GIZ, and other parties here, also distinguished colleagues, speakers, yeah. So I think what Bappenas do in regard of the Kampala principle is not new, yeah. So you know, as mandated in the National Development Plan, so actually the private sector involvement in development process are become more strategic, yeah. So this is also applies in the development cooperation sector actually. And since 2020, Bappenas measures the level of the participation of the non-state actor, yeah, including the private, yeah, in the development cooperation. So I think we have almost 2,000 private sector, private company in our list. Yeah. So in 2020, we start to measure, yeah, with around nearly 700 company, yeah, as a sample. So, and this private sector actually coming from mostly from the manufacturing industry. I think it's around 20%. Yeah. And then transportation, in the transportation and logistics is also nearly 20%. Then coming to the finance and insurance sector, yeah, 14%. The construction is nearly 13%, and also the agriculture, forestry, and fisheries sectors, yeah, around 6%. So I think this is the small step, yeah, for us, but give us a lot of impact on how the Bapnas can grow the policy, on how we can increase the private sector engagement in the development process, yeah, particularly in the development cooperation. Back to you.
And how do you see some of the priorities for improvement to create win-win partnerships?
Yes, this is, I think it's a good question, yeah, the priority. So when we set the priority to engage the private sector, this is actually challenging for us, yeah. As we may aware that the private sector, it's not easy to bring those company into our policy, yeah. Since some some, I don't know, maybe colleagues from the private sector also can give the issues, yeah. But the converging interest, yeah, is also it's not easy, yeah. And share values also, this has become more, yeah, issues for us, yeah. But I think Bappenas also set the priority for their involvement to us, to the most benefit smells, yeah, so that the private sector also can interesting, yeah, to join with us, yeah, in the development process.
Is there one lesson that you would like to share with the participants, or something that you want people to take up in the discussion today?
Well, yes, the lesson, I think we since 2020, yeah, we got a lot of lesson when we try to engage or to attract the private sector into our development process, yeah. For example, that they feel that the government priorities and their business activities sometimes in the different way, yeah. So this is the big lesson learned that government, the Bappenas can solve it, yeah. Would like to solve, yeah. So that's why through the effort on the measuring the participation, the private sector into our development cooperation. This is, I think, is very strategic one, and we continue to do it until 2024, and maybe on the next 5 years development plan. Yeah, we also continue with this measurement. Thank you.
Excellent, thank you. I'm hearing that there's a strategic basis for engagement, and there remains a need for some alignment along policies and priorities. Mr. Junardi, Yaya, how do you see the role of the private sector in development cooperation? Can you share a concrete example of that role, and what are you looking for win-win situations?
Okay, thank you very much. And again, thank you for the opportunity to speak in this forum. And I think, again, the introduction of the Kampala principles is also very right time for Indonesia now. Okay, just this morning, we just also introduced once more after, several times about women empowerment principles during the ring the bells of the gender equality together with IDX this morning. So it's a lot of principles, and I think it's all of them are really related to how to do things to achieve the SDGs. Now, business community should certainly play a very important one to for the achievement of the SDGs. And in order to do that, there's no other way. We have to do it through these partnership programs. And the partnership is very important. And I just give you one or two examples now, okay, and then discuss that later on. We have done several projects going on, and I have put in the business case book for this one too. Just give you an example is that, for example, we have these business actions in a collaboration with Dr. Share to provide personal protective equipment for these COVID things for the remote hospital and remote islands in Indonesia. Dr. Share is the voluntary non-profit healthcare providing the support to the healthcare for these people, the poor community in the remote, especially in the remote islands, in the remote location, okay, by using the what they call the floating hospitals. So during this COVID, as you know, that all of, especially in the 2020, where we have all of this panic about how to handle that. So the business coming together, organized and initiated by Global Compact, putting together funds, assistance, skills, IT, in order to work together with the Dr. Share to provide all of this support to the medical care, protective equipment for remote islands. So this covered already, like for example, like 270 hospitals in the 43 cities in 28 provinces. Okay, and this support with the surgical mask, medical gloves, medical goggles, hazmat unit, and everything today. So that's one of the example for this, the real concrete examples. Another example quickly is because, for example, the business actions for fulfillment of the birth certificate through this for these human rights things, because the civil right is important, and then for the kids, for the poor families, and also access to the clean water in the East Nusa Tenggara area. So now, what drives the business to do that? Okay. Number one is, of course, there is a value, mission, and vision for each of the corporation to do that, whatever it is, the values. Okay. And second thing is also, so it's driven from the internal things. Another is also, of course, driven from the social and community, because, with the spirit of being good citizen, then we would like to do something when we have all of these community problems, overcoming of these poverties, and then health and all those things. So the other thing is because of this, the understanding about how to do things better for the community, which basically directly or indirectly, also giving you to the business growth. Okay. As you know that we know what we call the 3 Ps: people, planet, profit. And now with SDGs, we are now moving to the 5 Ps. Okay. People still the same, planet is still the same, profit now become prosperity. But now the 2 things needed is a peace and partnerships. So everybody is business actually is recognizing that all this pressure from the community, pressure from the customer demands, pressure from the climate issues, excuse me, that the business should look at it now, these 5 Ps rather than only profitability. So it's no longer profit issues, but it's sustainability issue. But to be sustained, then you have to do the profit, of course. Okay, and in order to do that, then you have to go through the whole principle of the business and marketing. But at the same time, also you need to work together with a lot of stakeholders. Either this is the government, whether this is the NGO, CSO, or international organizations, or also for example government, and UN, of course, because we are part of the UN Global Compact here. So it is a kind of all together in order to do that, so that we can work together according to their industries and so on. There's a specific industry. People from issue on the plantation and so forth, they have all these climate issues that they have to work on. Okay, and then bank has to put in different financing things and others. So every industry will do their priority based on the industry specific, but all together the same thing also to address several parts of the SDG goals in order to achieve the growth at the same time.
How do you think about the quality of partnerships? I mean, you gave us a good example of health and pandemic response, clearly under pressure, in crisis, something had to be done quickly. What kind of made that partnership possible? And was it reasonable to think about the quality of that partnership? And can you think about principles in a time of crisis?
Well, you need to do that. Number one is that I think for doing these partnerships, to start with, is that trust is important. Okay, and trust will relate also to that accountability, transparencies, and tracking of project management. I'm not going to provide anything to do something if I know that my partner is not trusted. So that's number one. And number two is that again, you have to work together to cover the strength of each of their partners. Okay, I'm working with the students and IT people in order to create the system needed to track the projects. That's another offer the problem. We have been working together with hospitals and to make sure, for example, that all that we provide is tracked and reported. How many surgical masks they received, what for? Because of what we are also responsible to give feedback to the donors in order, that to make sure that the project is being the good is being delivered properly. Okay. In terms of, for example, the other occasion in the East Nusa Tenggara project with the civil rights, then we track down together with the government, okay, the poor family things, and then how to measure what kind of requirements is needed. There's a lot of complication in the process, but the government is involved, and also we track down also what is needed. Now, the important one is also something that new now. Okay, it's not only how busy we are doing it, how much we are giving it. The important for us now in order to do these partnerships, what are the impacts that we can give to do that? So it's a lot of things to be done. Okay, we cannot do all. So the priority is also based on the impact analysis of the impact investment for each of the projects. Okay, and when we are talking about this impact, that means also that we have to measure properly, doing the reporting properly about this one, and also that transparently to include everybody on the partners for these collaborations.
Right, right. Well, thank you for the work that you're doing at Global Compact to build bridges, to build trust with impact. And thank you for ringing the bell for gender equality. Happy International Women's Day to all.
Yes, thank you.
We need the perspective of civil society, whether civil society is inside partnerships or monitoring partnerships. And I now turn to Rita Triharyani at the Yakum Rehabilitation Center. Rita, can you tell us, how do you see the appropriate and effective role of the private sector? And as a counterpart, how do you see the role of civil society in partnerships?
Okay, good morning, everyone. Thank you. Greeting from Yakum Rehabilitation Center here in Yogyakarta. Before I answer that question, Kim, I want to share one video. It kind of the video based on Yakum's experiences as a national CSO concerned with disability inclusion, addressing inclusive employment for persons with disabilities. This is a concrete example for our roles and intervention partners in aspect of private sector engagement in development cooperation based on the Kampala principle. Can you help me to share the video? Okay, so before that, let me introduce myself. I'm Rita. I'm a woman with disabilities with 7 fingers. I'm wearing lurik now as Indonesian traditional pattern. It's a kind of way of inclusive way to introduce myself. Maybe for blind people, maybe they are a part of us in our Zoom meeting today.
Yeah.
Okay, so thank you for invite us today. Thank you for GPDC and also UNDP. It's an honor for me as a CSO representative on this panel. I will represent the CPDE Civil Partnership for Development Effectiveness, a global CSO network focusing on development effectiveness, and also Yakum as a national CSO in Indonesia. We're working on development and also humanitarian program with the right-based approach and also focusing on inclusion, including inclusion, disability inclusion. So based on the data of Susenas, actually on 2018, we have 7.4 million people with disabilities in Indonesia. Most of them are in a productive age gap, which is more than 3.6 million of the total of persons with disability in Indonesia. Therefore, those million people with different abilities, different type of disabilities, and different backgrounds, they will need an inclusive employment system. So as a CSO, we are CPDE and also Yakum. CPDE has a CSO task force working on a private sector. We call it private sector engagement, or PSE, which succeeded in developing a handbook. So before I inform about what we do in the Kampala principle, we want to share about this handbook, in which is introduces the reader to provide sector engagement and the Kampala principle, which lay down broad strategies for the PSE in development cooperation, and also many technical discussion and how CSOs can monitor PSE at the country level or and sub-country level. This handbook on PSE has been developed providing clarification on CPDE's perspective on effective and ineffective PSE, and also it contains the concrete tools for CSO to monitor, contribute, and engage to an effective PSE at national and local level. I will share with you in the chat box so the CPDE's handbook link. You can refer to page 14 of the handbook for a clear explanation on CPD's approach to PSE in development cooperation. It is a way of appraising the Kampala principle from the CSO's side by providing a framework and concrete tools, how to advocate for government regulation, how to monitor business behavior for accountability, and how to promote more engagement of and synergies with the micro, small, and medium enterprises in development cooperation project. About the role and what should civil society play in making the engagement of the private sector development. Well, CSOs can be strategically engaged in ensuring the inclusive and participatory approach of development cooperation with the private sector, means leaving no one behind, right? So Yakum has experiences in developing inclusive module for Balai Latihan Kerja, we call it BLK, and also we engaging with private sector in developing preparation training program for potential workers from person with disabilities to enter specific job required in private retail store business such as Alfamart. We also work collaboration with the private sector to fulfill the quota of 1% of provisions for companies on job matching and also recruitment, internship to job placement of person with disabilities. We also strengthen the capacity of person with disabilities through hard skill and soft skill training to equip them in managing the job recruitment and also internship process. And how about the engagement, engage with the multi-stakeholder partnership with the private sector, and what is our lesson learned, challenges, etc. First and foremost, we promote the inclusive approach to business communities by designing inclusive capacity building for inclusive employment programs and helping them fulfill their duties to follow 1% quota. Example like Alfamart, and also we work with the inclusive barista, tailor, we engage with small and medium coffee shop business and confection industry. We show how to create inclusive employment programs and encourage business communities to see the mutual added value of such an approach. Another important aspect of work is to identify, to assess, to train the candidate participant of barista training, for the example. And also we are able to be a bridge for persons with disabilities and private sectors in adjusting the reasonable accommodation. And additionally, in a cooperation with BPJS Ketenagakerjaan, is a government manpower insurance. Correct me if I'm wrong in English. We call it a return to work program. So we support and assist the companies whose employee become person with disabilities due to industrial accidents in fulfilling their duties, as well as ensuring accessibility assessment are conducted by the private sector.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Rita. And I appreciate your bringing out collaborating with micro, small, medium enterprises and the need to build inclusion into the design of programs. We have two more key perspectives before we go to part two. I would call on Maria Nurani from Kadin. Please, what do you look for in a good partnership and how do we get there?
Okay, thank you, Kim, for the opportunity. Actually, to answering your question, what business sector looking for, the answer actually the principle of the Kampala, especially the principle 2, the result and targeted impact, principle 3, inclusive partnership, and principle 4, transparency and accountability. Because there's a tendency here when we have a partnership or collaboration with other stakeholders, the other stakeholders only see private sectors as a fund provider and the other sector as the implementer of the activity. While I always believe that in a collaboration, all stakeholders should contribute something, especially their respective resources, either it's financial, thoughts, competency, and etc., including from the NGO, small, medium enterprise, and also the government. And the other challenge we have right now is because for most cases when we do collaboration, the only indicator of performance only the amount of money contributed by the private sector, whereas we understand that what we do is really to provide some solution. And also we have difficulty in collaboration because for some stakeholders, they only have a more short-term planning and budgeting and only work in a sectoral field. And then because the indicator of performance only about the amount of money, sometimes people just don't care about the objective, about the baseline data, and also the achievement. So, and also sometimes there's no report on monitoring or evaluation of the collaboration. Whereas in collaboration, our partnership, especially for sustainable development, we understand that we talking about a long-term goal and objective, and we need also to understand that there's a interrelated and interdependencies among the environmental, social, and economic aspect. And so that's why we really need to find a way to overcome the challenges I mentioned before. And so in collaboration, we need to really recognize and acknowledge actually that the all stakeholders involved have different nature, interests, motivation, competency, and also resources, but we have the same problem. So we have a common but differentiated responsibility, then actually we could complement each other. So in this respect, I see that the role of a private sector actually, because most of the time the private sector will be there, will be in the site for a very long time. And also for private sector, once we see the rationale of the collaboration to the business, we usually will commit and dedicate resources to make it work. So I think private sector could help to setting the context and also provide resources and competency to ensure the activity could have a result and targeted impact. Because in private sector, we believe that we can only manage what we can measure. And it also apply to micro, small, and medium enterprise, not only for the MNC, of course, because as a business, we all have the same goals, which are to survive and to grow. And so when you want to collaborate and have partnership with a business, I think you always can associate the objective of the collaboration with the issue of survival of and growing, either in short term or a longer time. And also it's very important to ensure them, especially the micro, small, and medium enterprise, that they don't always necessarily contribute financial resources if they don't have. They still always share their other competencies and resources. So that's, I think, Kim. And I about 2 or 3 months ago, I heard about this wonderful collaboration among the ICRAF. It's the World Global Agroforestry Research Center, and with the NGO and donors from Watala Ford Foundation and UK's Department of International Development, and also with the state-owned hydroelectric plant there, and also with a national and local government. The business case is very interesting because the activity actually around about more than 20 years, and it is about the payment for ecosystem services. So this is sited in Lampung, Sumatra, in way beside watershed. We understand that there's about 30 years ago, there's a conversion, a land use conversion from a forest into a coffee plantation. And
Maria, if you don't mind, could you give us kind of a highlight lesson, and then maybe share the report on the side?
Yeah,
we're short on time.
Yeah, sure. So what I like about this example is because this is about a long-term partnership about all the stakeholders necessary. It's talking about a conflict resolution, not only the result, not only the good result, but also the process. There's up and downs, and also it works because there's certain result and impacted targeted impact they have. So at the end, everyone happy because they all contribute their respective resources, and the goals in the regional level is achieved. I think that's Kim from me.
Wonderful. Really well put what you said, Maria, about the complementarities and the responsibilities and partnerships, making the pieces of the puzzle fit together. And Steve from TFO Canada, I think maybe you help us look at the development partner perspective, the development cooperation piece of this, and you get to round out the conversation.
Great. Good morning, everyone. Good evening from Ottawa, Canada. And so when we talk about private sector engagement, certainly as a non-government, non-profit organization whose mission is to improve lives through the creation of sustainable trade partnerships for exporters from developing countries with Canadian and foreign buyers. You can understand that private sector engagement is something that we do on a very regular basis. In fact, when we look at the Sustainable Development Goals, the UN Sustainable Development Goals, we really kind of focus in on two of them, which is really around SDG number 5, achieving gender equality and the empowerment of women and girls. And this is because a lot of our work is actually helping to support women entrepreneurs, women-owned business, women-led businesses, to help them to be able to participate in international markets and access foreign markets. And then number 8 is really around decent work and economic growth. So once again, a lot of our work is very much focused on helping SMEs to be able to access foreign markets. If you'll indulge me, I've kind of taken a crack at looking at the 5 principles of the Kampala principles, and really want to try to draw the link between the work that we do in Indonesia and how we can kind of make those 5 principles come to life. And so the first one, looking at the inclusive country ownership, and certainly, strengthening and coordination, alignment, capacity building. So we work very closely with a number of partners in Indonesia, including DGNED, so the Directorate General for National Export Development, which is of course a large government agency that's there to help to promote exports from Indonesia. We also worked with other organizations like the Indonesia Export Training Center. And so the whole idea there is to, really help to build their capacity and have that knowledge transfer so that they're able to support the SMEs themselves to be able to sell and market their products into Canada. Principle number 2 around results and impact. It's interesting. A similar organization to TFO Canada a few years ago conducted a study. It was actually conducted by the Wageningen Economic Research and Erasmus University, and it was supported through the Center for Promotion of Imports from Developing Countries. And they found that over a 4-year period, looking at some 800 companies, that a 10% increase in exports led to a 12% growth in employment. And so, this was obviously some tremendous development impact when you think about the engagement of both the importers and the exporters from a private sector engagement perspective. Principle number 3 around inclusive partnerships. And so, this is really key to a lot of the work that TFO Canada does. In fact, when we're looking at projects, proposals, we not only engage with the donor community. So one of our main donors, if you will, is the Canadian government, an entity called Global Affairs Canada. And so we certainly engage with them to look at what their priorities are and where they would want to place some of their development investments. But we also look at engagement with the local governments, governments in Indonesia, and of course the SMEs themselves to really look at how can we best support and what kind of a project will really yield important results going forward. And a lot of that also is reliant on local expertise. So it's not just Canadians doing work in Indonesia, it's actually Canadians working with local experts in Indonesia, so that together we're collaborating and delivering successful engagements. Number 4, around transparency and accountability. And so really for us, the sustainability piece is around knowledge transfer and ensuring that, there's changes in behavior and successes that are tracked along the way and monitoring those successes. And for us, really another key success is when a project is over, trade continues. So those SMEs in Indonesia that we've introduced to Canadian buyers, we're out of the picture, but commerce continues, and those trade relationships not only continue, but hopefully actually increase and expand. And number 5, around leaving no one behind. you know, a lot of our work, so it's not just focused on the capital cities, so not just working with SMEs in Jakarta, we're actually looking to help to broaden and look at vulnerable populations, other areas, far out reaching areas, and we want to really be able to help to build their capacity, train them, help them with their export plans, adapting products, you know, meeting international standards. And so in a way, you know, it's really helping them along the way so that they can become export ready. And so that's really trying to mitigate risks, because the other side of the equation is, you know, when you look at working with the importer community, we want to be seen as being a sourcing partner. And so you can hopefully through, you know, me kind of meandering through the 5 principles of, you can see how we really apply those principles in our work and engaging the private sector, not only from, you know, the importer side, but obviously very closely with the exporter side as well.
Thank you, Steve. And I love how you've mapped what you're doing against the principles. And I would encourage our Indonesian participants and guests to be thinking about your partnerships and how would you map onto the Kampala principles, the 5 principles. Well, thank you, everyone. Please join me in thanking our wonderful panel. I am going to hand over my duties to our next moderator, Sagita, who is a business and human rights specialist at UNDP Indonesia, promoting the guiding principles of business and human rights, and is here to lead you in the rest of the session. Thank you so much for your time and attention.
Thank you, Kim. Good morning, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here moderating the session, particularly as this subject is very relevant for Indonesia right now. As we know, the government of Indonesia is currently also developing national strategy on business and human rights, and human rights are embedded throughout the SDGs. So the discussion today is very timely and also very relevant for us, I think. In this second hour, we are taking the points raised in the panel discussion one level deeper with this private sector in-depth roundtable discussion that places Indonesian companies' perspectives on how to integrate the Kampala principles in business practices in the context of development cooperation, front and center. Although the discussion focused on the private sector engagement and perspective, we welcome government representatives, CSO, development partners, and trade unions and others to stay in touch with that, to stay tuned here in the sessions, to listen in and learn from the private sectors on their perspective within this engagement in the development cooperation. In early 2021, the GPEDC published a set of case studies featuring businesses exemplifying the Kampala principles in practice. Now we want to hear from Saber Kauduri, President of Interparliamentary Union, or IPU, and Business Leader Caucus member, and his experience in a unique public-private collaboration for a digital triage and testing booth in Bangladesh for pandemic response. Mr. Kauduri served as the 28th president of the IPU from 2014 to 2017 and has received one of the highest national honors, Orders of Friendship, for his outstanding work and service. Mr. Kauduri has excelled in various roles, responsibilities in parliament, government, political party, and sports administration, including current chairs of the Parliamentary Standing Committee on Ministry of Environment, Forest, and Climate Change, and a member of the Parliamentary Committee on Ministry of Planning. He holds a joint honors degree in economics and politics, as well as a diploma in law. Saber, how are digital healthcare solutions, the Institute for Developing Science and Health Initiative and Magda Medical College and Hospital implementing the Kampala principles in their development cooperation partnership? The floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Sagita, and a very good morning to everyone from Dhaka, Bangladesh. I've been listening with great interest to the first session. Wonderful to see Kim and of course Uta, who has been an outstanding champion. You know, she has made all of us really energized about this whole issue of Kampala principles and how it can take forward a public-private partnership when we come to various challenges in the world today. So let me just share some thoughts with you about the Bangladesh experience. Sagita, as you mentioned, there have also been other case studies which are well documented in the GPDC website. So one case study was in Bangladesh concerning the response to the global pandemic, the COVID-19. There have also been 3 other case studies which are equally compelling and powerful, if I may say. There was one in Colombia, there was one in Philippines, and the other in Uganda. And they covered areas such as women's health, uh, well-being of employees, and sustainable agriculture. So I would encourage all of our friends and colleagues in Indonesia to have a look at those because they really demonstrate the breadth and width of this of the application of the Kampala principles. So the story, as far as Bangladesh case study goes, dates back exactly. It's 2 years to the day today. That's quite a coincidence because the first COVID cases were diagnosed in Bangladesh around the 8th or 9th of March in the year 2020. And from that moment on, the demand for testing really shot up. As you can imagine, during the early days, there was a lot of uncertainty. There was a panic. People were not well informed. And I think even governments were struggling to understand how the COVID pandemic is going to play out. So WHO came out with a recommendation. They called it the test, the trace, and the treat. So there are various models being floated around. And the public health system in Bangladesh, I think, was also overwhelmed because people started going into hospitals, hospitals that were providing normal care to patients. For instance, Mugda Hospital, which is in my constituency, you mentioned about it, Sagita, in your opening remarks, would handle about 3,000 to 3,500 outpatients every day. And overnight, it was transformed into a COVID hospital. And so on the one hand, you had the testing challenge, and then you also had the treatment challenge, once you have tested the people. And the government simply didn't have the capacity. So this is when really, I suppose, necessity, we say necessity is the mother of invention. So this is when a number of entities came together. So we had digital healthcare solutions, which is a social enterprise. We had iDeshi, which is focused on research and science. And then, of course, we had the government hospital at Mugda. There was also some participation early on from UK Aid, who provided the seed money for some of the work. And so as you can see, it was already a very diverse partnership. And everyone was thinking about, well, how can we provide these services? How can we respond to the demand? And the other challenge, of course, was whatever limited services were available in Bangladesh at that time, which was right at the beginning of the pandemic phase, could only be accessed by the well-to-do. So access to affordable testing was also a major challenge. And of course, this goes to one of the fundamental concepts of leaving no one behind. So how do you reach out to those who are already disadvantaged? How do you reach out to those who are marginalized in many respects and provide them the very essential part of testing? Because it's only after testing that everything else comes in. So then there was also an international element because the team was trying to figure out, well, what is the model that we are going to use? So the South Korean model, and as we know, South Korea was extremely and remarkably successful in the first phase of the COVID pandemic to contain this. And they had this rapid testing facility. So a system of triage and testing booth was set up in the Mugda hospital. So the space was provided by the hospital, the logistics support was provided by them. And digital healthcare solutions and iDeshi went in. iDeshi, of course, had the technology, they were aware of the science, they had the PCR machine. So that was then installed over there. And the digital aspect came in because we are also trying to leverage technology. Remember, of course, when you talk about the response to COVID, that this was a very special type of a pandemic where the patient wasn't really allowed to interact with the doctor as you would do on a normal case. So setting up a booth which was well covered and well protected, and the patients would come there, they were screened, they were tested. There was also video technology available so that the patients could actually talk to the doctor. So whoever was suspected could actually come in there. And I believe that there were a total of 14,000 people who initially came in. So we were able to screen them because, of course, if someone doesn't need a COVID test, then you don't want to give it to them and basically, preserve that valuable resource you have, because at that time, even kits were limited. Now, of course, we know that a lot of patients were also asymptomatic. So that was really a tremendous help because it allowed us to physically administer close to 8,000 tests. And of course, those who were identified with having COVID were given advice. There were also a helpline. So this was really a groundbreaking partnership that was really responding to those who are in danger of being left behind. Of course, there was the ownership aspect because it was a government hospital and the Department of Health Services, which is responsible for providing health to the entire nation. So there was the government buy-in from day one. There was a lot of transparency because every day the results were available, how many people were being tested, what was being done with the test results, how are they counseled, how are we going to out to the community, how are we informing them about this whole case. So that was also very transparent, and transparency, of course, leads to impact assessment. We were able to do that. The partnership was a very close partnership. There was constant communication. And remember, this was at the time of a global pandemic, a national emergency. So we didn't really have the luxury of trying to think through what we are going to do and work out what would be the results. So it was instant decision-making, instant coordination, sharing of responsibilities, respect for the partner, not just trust, but knowing that, yes, this is a partner that is actually bringing value. And we're constantly adding value to it. So it was the private sector, the government, really everyone coming together, which is what made it a very effective partnership, I believe. In a country like Bangladesh, and I think also this applies to Indonesia to a large extent, the concept of public health is not really as developed as we would like to see it. The focus is still on medicinal health. How many hospital beds you have, how many doctors we have, how many nurses we have. But the whole area of a pandemic has given focus to this so far not as prioritized sector of public health. So I think this bodes really well for the future also. And the good thing is, after the very successful demonstration and the setting off of the project, the proof of concept, the government has now taken it over. So this is not just a one-off. It is a model that has been successful to the extent that the government has taken it over. Government now has full ownership. And the hope, of course, is that it's going to apply to other challenges that we have in Bangladesh. Let me wrap up my few comments by having a few slides, which is actually taken from the website on the case studies, and this actually shows you where we have the impact. Can we go to the? This is the picture, as you can see. How the test was administered, and you can see that there is a physical partition. The individual who is testing it is behind this glass partition. And even when the patients were being seated for the test, they'd be spaced out. They wouldn't all be in one place. This is just to show you, give you a feel for what it was. The queues, of course, were very long. Most of the hospitals had people queuing up from 6 to 7 in the morning. And of course, that in itself was a challenge, because if anyone was already infected, then a queue and the gathering of people means that they're going to spread the disease. So very challenging times, and coming up with what I would say was a winning formula, of course, I think is a great affirmation of the Kampala principles. It wasn't that, before starting off the project, we sat down and we said, what is the checklist and does it meet the checklist? But when we analyze the success of this venture, we see how important, how relevant, and how powerful the Kampala principles can be. Each of them, I think we have. So if you want to go through targets, we can do that. There are a number of slides for that as well. But I just wanted to give you a flavor for this and say that in the case of Bangladesh, we have had a very, very powerful example. And I think it's important that we share that example with other countries, more so Indonesia. And also keep in mind that we are not saying that there is one side that fits all. For us, I think leaving no one behind was a very important part of the whole exercise. As I've said, we were reaching out to the disadvantaged. The other was, of course, the inclusive ownership and the partnership, both very, very important. And then being able to measure the results, measure the impact. I think these are all aspects that come through very powerfully when we look at the Bangladesh experience. Sagita, those are my few words. I don't want to spend a lot of time going through it because I think the principles have been adequately outlined, Uta at the beginning, and after that we had a number of panelists coming in. But I just wanted to draw focus to this and say that there is great relevance and there is great value in having a very close look at the Kampala principles and then using that as a means to energize public-private partnership. And of course, at the end of the day, the qualitative and the quantitative impacts that we have on development cooperation are immense. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Saber, for bringing the Kampala principle to life with this insightful case study. I heard today from Pak Nori Masasi Mamura, from our government Bappenas, Bapak Prianto, and also from you that government cannot work alone. That's why this partnership within the development cooperation is a necessity, critical, and strategic in achieving SDGs. Thank you so much again for the case study. And moving on to the open debate, we have a few poll questions prepared, followed by a deeper discussion space. We will have several questions, so let's launch the first poll. May someone share the poll, please? Yeah. I invite everyone to follow this poll. Mohon Ibu dan Bapak mengikuti pollingnya, silakan. Saya beri waktu sedikit lagi. Dari rekan kami mungkin bisa ada yang menginformasikan jika sudah mengisi. Okay, we have only 60 participants who are filling in the polling. We will give a little bit more time for everyone. Okay, maybe a few more seconds. Today, we have quite a large number of participants, more than 200 participants. So we hope we have these good numbers in filling in the polling. Okay, we have more. Okay, I think we could announce the result right now. Masih mengisi? Oke, mungkin masih beberapa detik lagi. Okay, and this is the result. If we could see here, let me read it through. 47 is on the limited knowledge on how to access key partners. Okay, so this is one of the main challenges that's shared by our participants in engaging within this cooperation. So limited knowledge on how to access key partners, government, civil society, and others. Thank you so much for participating in this polling. I think from this, we would like to invite everyone in the session today, seeing the challenges in development cooperation with the government, civil society, trade unions, and development partners. And what from these challenges, we would like to hear from you. What drives your engagement then in doing this collaboration with other partners? Perhaps I could invite one or two participants to share this from the private sector, perhaps. I think in the morning I see Ibu Prita Raska from IKEA. If you would like to share your experience, what drive IKEA, for example, in within the engagement in the development cooperation partnership. Is Ibu Prita still with us today from IKEA? Or anyone who would like to share apa yang mendorong perusahaan Ibu dan Bapak terlibat dalam, mungkin ada yang ingin share sedikit motivasinya apa gitu. Oh, okay. We are Ibu Prita said in the chat, she's still with us, but in other meeting as well. Okay, mungkin from others, atau mungkin I can invite Pak Junardi. Pak Junardi, are you still with us, Pak? Maybe you could share what do you think drive business, the engagement.
Yeah, okay. Thank you very much.
Pak Jun, terima kasih, Pak.
Yeah, I'll just give you one example of what drives the company for this engagement. Okay, I'm just using example here. Okay, take example that, and this is where I analyze and look at it. For example, here Andalan pulp paper. They have the mission to have zero carbon emission by 2030. What drives this is because of these environmental issues, continue the sustainability of this business and so forth. And then another mission from this support and develop in such a way that all the populations in the boundary of 50 kilometers will be managed in such a way that they are now no more in the poverty levels. What drives this? Because it is a social license. Because helping the community surrounding, the place become the source of the human resources for the workers, and it's also the peace in the environment, and also actually at the same time is also the reputations of the company in doing the work. Okay, so several items that driving the business because of the internal value systems and also the mission they have to the stakeholders. Either this is government, this is the community, this is the customers, and so forth. That will be basically, at the end of the day, it is a sustainable business. Maybe I see Pak Sihol here. Maybe I'm just using RIPP as an example. Maybe Pak Sihol can also add for this one.
Thank you so much, Pak Jun. Could we invite Pak Sihol maybe? Or we could move to the other discussion about what do you think can enhance the impact of development cooperation partnership in which you are involved. So this is actually, we would like to hear from the business perspective, what can enhance this development cooperation. So, jadi apa yang bisa dilakukan untuk meningkatkan supaya kemitraan ini tuh lebih efektif gitu. Dari beberapa perusahaan yang ikut hadir di sini atau asosiasi bisnis. Or I think I also see a participants from the trade union, Ibu siapa tadi? Is it Ibu Marita? Maybe perhaps if you like to share your perspective, Ibu, silakan Ibu. Apakah itu Ibu Marita? Atau mungkin justru dari Kadin? Yeah, to share the perspective from the business, what can enhance the impact of development cooperation partnership in which you are involved. Mungkin pendapat dari Kadin juga mewakili beberapa anggota-anggota yang terlibat di dalam.
I think it's as I mentioned earlier, yeah, that to enhance the impact is we need to understand first the baseline data of the problem, and then exactly what's the objective and the indicator of performance of this collaboration, because it's something that not always collaboration success has. So once we have the indicator, then we will easier to do the monitoring and evaluation. And the evaluation is not only how to make it successful when we share the result, not only share the good or a best practices, but also how to overcome the failure or something like that. Because there's tendency here when we don't achieve the goals, then the goals itself then change, just to give perception that the program is successful. So what we really need here is actually do evaluation and embrace the failure as a learning process, as a curve learning process, and also we need to also recognize that partnership in sustainable development needs long-term goal, and also long-term in duration. So short-term program is should be limited. So yeah, so I think that's one or two points from me.
Thank you so much, Ibu, for the insights. So evidence base is very critical, ya Ibu, from the beginning of the intervention as a baseline, and also for to measure the result, so the monitoring and evaluation. So evidence-based intervention is very critical. Thank you so much, Ibu, for sharing. And now we're moving on the second poll, where we want to focus our discussion on accountability and transparency of impact by measuring and disseminating result. Could we please have the the poll, please? Thank you. Ya, so Ibu dan Bapak, kita punya 2 pertanyaan untuk pollingnya. Mohon partisipasinya untuk mengisi. Kami tunggu beberapa. Ya, ini ada masukan dari Ibu Ana bahwa mungkin yang lebih relevan, meski semua bisa mengisi dengan asumsi. Ya benar Bu, karena memang pesertanya bukan hanya dari pelaku bisnis, tapi jika ada yang ingin mengisi dengan asumsi apa yang diketahui untuk bisa membantu, silakan. Oke, kami tunggu sampai kurang lebih 10 detik lagi, kami hitung sampai 10. All right, I think now we can launch the result of the polling. Okay, for the questions number 1, the value added for your business to disclose and measure your impact. We have the highest number is on to map the contribution to SDGs. Yeah, I think this is very clear where nowadays private sector is really into the SDGs achievements. So this is very important. And then on the second question, the prerequisite in engagement for a successful engagement, we have a second. Also to be open, honest, and clear on the net value gain and risk that derive from the partnership. Okay, thank you very much for everyone in participating in the polling. And I would like to move on to the discussion, then seeing the challenges, the value added, the drivers to be in part of this development cooperation partnership. We would like to hear and learn from you. What would you recommend to the government, development partners, civil society organization, and trade union to improve the effectiveness of this engagement with you in the context of development cooperations for the delivery services to the base of the socio-economic pyramid. Jadi kami sangat berharap masukan dari Ibu dan Bapak, baik dari private sector maupun dari yang lain. Apa yang kita saran-saran untuk memperbaiki aktivitas dari yang mengenai Ibu dan Bapak terlibat, supaya impact-nya itu lebih efektif. Silakan Ibu dan Bapak bisa unmute atau juga bisa saya bisa undang. Oh, saya melihat di sini ada Ibu Erna Witular di sesi kita hari ini. Selamat pagi Erna Witular. Erna Witular. Pagi Ibu Erna, apakah masih di dalam Zoom-nya? Mungkin saya bisa juga undang Bapak Eri Riana. Bapak Eri Riana dari Institute of Corporation Director. Bapak Eri, silakan Pak, mungkin ingin share perspektifnya terkait saran-saran supaya engagement ini bisa lebih efektif.
Okay, thank you, Gita. I'm working with IICD and also SAIP, and we established coalition action against corruption, whereas the Kampala Principle for Transparency and Accountability is one of our pillars as well. So I think KAKI, we call it KAKI in Bahasa Koalisi Anti Korupsi Indonesia, could have a synergy with this movement in such a way that transparency and accountability could be enhanced among us. And then based on that, we could also develop better cooperation within all stakeholders. Itu aja kita. Terima kasih.
Terima kasih Pak Eri atas masukannya. Sudah dicatat juga. Mungkin saya bisa mengundang juga dari yang lain, tapi silakan Ibu dan Bapak ada yang berbicara, langsung unmute, silakan.
Ada Ibu Natalia Subagio itu.
Mungkin saya bisa mengundang juga, mungkin kita bisa development partner seperti sebentar saya lihat ada Pak Michael dari Tanah, mungkin Pak, silakan Pak Michael. Saya melihat juga ada beberapa yang sudah raise hand ya. Oke, Pak Michael silakan, nanti saya akan lanjut dengan Ibu Maria. Apakah Pak Michael masih bersama kami? Mungkin saya bisa ke Ibu Maria terlebih dahulu. Silakan, please, Ibu Maria.
Yeah, thank you so much. I'm sure I will speak in my language in Bahasa. Jadi bagi kami, bagi Serikat Buruh, mungkin perannya lebih banyak sebagai objek di dalam pembangunan, dan concern kami pokok kalau di SDGs misalnya lebih banyak di 5 poin, di goal 5, 3, 5, 8, 5, 3, 10, dan 13. Dan dalam hal ini, bila pun sebagai objek, antara objek dengan subjek, maka peran Serikat Buruh banyak sebagai monitoring dan evaluasi, serta menyuarakan masalah-masalah yang muncul atas nilai-nilai yang kurang dari SDGs yang ada di Indonesia ini. Dan untuk itu biasanya selalu memang lebih banyak kami meminta melalui sebuah dialog, tidak hanya untuk menyuarakan aspirasi dari Serikat Buruh, tapi juga untuk mengusulkan upaya-upaya perbaikan dari tentu saja dari perspektif buruh, dan sayangnya memang dalam hal ini posisi Serikat Buruh sering tidak equal, tidak setara untuk menyuarakan ini, sehingga kesannya lebih sering dianggap terlalu banyak menuntut. Untuk itu kami kira sebagai juga sebuah bagian dari refleksi dan evaluasi ini bagi private sector, perlu sekali sebuah prinsip keterbukaan atas hal-hal yang bagi buruh, bagi masyarakat kelas bawah ini, lebih banyak kelas bawah ya dan menengah, akses untuk bisa lebih mengenal perjalanan bisnis ini selalu sulit, terutama misalnya untuk perusahaan multinasional dan supply chains, banyak hal yang tidak bisa diketahui secara jelas, sehingga ini menjadi hambatan untuk kami bisa berdialog secara setara. Dan kemudian di sana juga yang dibutuhkan kami kira bagi private sektor adalah untuk sebuah kemauan dan niat baik untuk melakukan dialog itu, serta komitmen tidak hanya terkait isu yang disuarakan, tapi juga sebuah penghargaan bagi kelas buruh, kelas masyarakat menengah dan ke bawah terutama, untuk bisa mendengarkan apa yang banyak menjadi masalah di tingkat bawah. Itu saya kira yang bisa saya kontribusikan untuk poin ini. Terima kasih.
Baik, terima kasih Bu Maria atas penyeritaan. Terima kasih untuk masukannya sudah dicatat kami. Dan saya ingin ke Pak Steve. Pak Steve,
yeah, just maybe a couple of things that we've certainly come across over the years is, you know, this whole idea of having a shared value. And I think one of the earlier presenters talked about, you know, the private sector and making sure that the private sector goals are well established and really creating that economic value. And then on the other side around, you know, what the government or public sector wants to achieve in terms of development goal or social value is really important when we talk about this level of engagement. And that goes from not just the, you know, being very clear in terms of what it is that we want to achieve jointly, but then also the reporting mechanisms, you know, how we're going to monitor and evaluate the engagement and the successes of a project, because, you know, I think we all know that the private sector measures things, you know, differently than certainly traditional development agencies do. And so there's a way to be able to achieve both. And so that we're speaking a common language, we're reporting against the same metrics to really achieve that shared value together. So that's those are just some thoughts in terms of some of the experiences that we've observed over the years.
Thank you so much, Steve. So echoing from what has been said by Kadin and also others, that monitoring and evaluation mechanism is also very important to measure the failure, to have some lesson learned, and also to measure the successes as a best practices. Thank you, Steve. And I see from Yakum, Ibu, silakan, you have raised your hand.
Thank you. Just a short response talking about the focus on result and accountability. Well, CSO actually can be an advisor and a referential focal point to ensuring the quality and also focus on result and accountability principles as followed from our best practices. Yakum's experience in campaigning for provision of accessible and reasonable accommodation at workspace. And there is a part of providing strategic assistance for respective companies through our job coach system towards the development of an inclusive environment. And how to make this more effective? Well, from the effectiveness point of view, CSO should not only be the target of CSR or even organizer only of the charity program with their capacity and network. We are can be your partner to contribute to business trying to work with the communities and minorities with compliance needs for incentives, as it is undeniable that we are have a key role in facilitating an achievement workforce for quotas for persons with disability and also for the inclusion processes. Like that. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ibu. So knowledge sharing, Ibu, that's also very important from the CSO, also from the private sectors, to share the experience. So from the CSO and also from the business, so it will strengthen the cooperation. And CSO should also be considered as a mutual partners or equal partners, not just for CSR or charity activities. All right, thank you, Ibu. And I see Ibu Natalia Subagjo raise hand. Silakan, Ibu. Thank you.
Okay, terima kasih atas kesempatan yang diberikan. I have 3 points I wanted to raise, and 2 were already raised by Steve, but I see no harm in just re-emphasizing. The challenge of alignment of the objectives of the private sector and the partners that we want to cooperate with. Sometimes it takes a lot of work to just find the alignment of both mission and objectives. Secondly, is in agreeing upon the terms of cooperation. Standards of governance may differ amongst the different partners, and so we need to work together to find this commonly agreed upon standards of governance. And third is a challenge, and that challenge is how to analyze impact. Measuring impact is not easy, but it is important to know to do this in order to ensure that the cooperation meets the various principles and the objectives that we want to achieve together. So those are the 3 points that I just wanted to highlight. Thank you again.
Thank you so much, Ibu Natalia. So again, measuring impact, this has been mentioned several times now today. So monitoring and evaluation is very important, and also to find a common understanding between some differences of the standard among partners is also very important. Thank you so much, Ibu, for the insights. And perhaps I would like to also invite Pak Ciprianus from UNDP, because UNDP also engaged with so many different actors, and we would like to hear also from the development partners what we can do better within this development cooperation. Silakan, Pak Cipri. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sagita, for inviting me. Let me first check with you whether you can hear me well. Thank you. Yeah, right. I think all has been said. How engagement with the private sector, with the development partners, by agencies like UNDP. I think the first is certainly how through this engagement we could see the development imperative, the needs. So basically the common goals, for the betterment of, communities or societies. And it was already mentioned by Pak Yunardi during his intervention that the key to such engagement is, how that we can build trust, right? Trust can only be built through engagement, through cooperations, through collaboration, building on each other's strength, and before maybe we come up with some kind of co-creation, how we really build a partnership in practice. I think there were already a number of examples mentioned as how this kind of partnership can then be built to serve the arising needs. I think from my own reflection, understanding the broad terms is certainly, rather straightforward, but it takes a commitment to go even further. And the co-creation process is really not easy, let alone when we really try to bring, this cooperation, collaboration in practice, because each agency operates with their own perhaps standards, code of conduct, and so on. But I think the commitment, to make things happen, the commitment to maximize the impacts will certainly take us there. So with that being said, I think the Kampala principles has served as a solid platform in reflecting this attempt to to bridge the whole of society approach, as it is written in the background document. I think this is a very good inspiration also for us here in Indonesia to take forward this kind of commitment and make it work in this country, as how we work in collaboration to address development challenges in meeting the SDGs goal here in Indonesia. Thank you, Sagita, and back to you.
Thank you so much, Pak Sipri. So yeah, it's very important within this co-creation, we have commitment, and Kampala Principles is considered as a great vehicle to move forward this commitment in achieving SDGs. Thank you, Bapak. And I think we have several comments as well in the chats. So if maybe Ibu Yakum also share the need to have a roadmap to implement the Kampala, this is a great idea. And then also from Speak Indonesia, perhaps Bapak Dormaringan Napitu atau Ibu Dormaringan Napitu, jika ingin berbicara, silakan Ibu di unmute. Ini idenya sangat baik. Bapak ya, maaf. Bapak, silakan. Silakan Bapak, kami akan unmute Pak. Saya sudah lihat Bapak. Oh, mungkin ada kendala di mic-nya. Or mungkin saya saja yang lain, apakah mendengar?
Tidak bisa mendengar Sagita.
Tidak ya, Bapak, atau mungkin pakai mic dari laptopnya.
Kedengaran?
Ya, silakan.
Oke, baik. Tapi saya berarti nggak dengar. Jadi terima kasih Bapak Ibu yang hadir pada pertemuan kita kali ini, khususnya juga Mbak Sagita. Mungkin masih ingat saya juga ya. Baik, saya berbicara dari perwakilan CSO ya. Saya dari Speak Indonesia. Kami saat ini memiliki partnership dengan private sector di beberapa tempat, paling tidak ada di Kerawang dan di Lampung juga. Saya tidak sebut dengan private sektornya. Tapi paling tidak dengan diskusi ini di dalam chat sudah saya sebutkan, untuk membuat supaya partnership itu menjadi lebih efektif, paling tidak ada empat hal yang harus kita perhatikan. Satu, bagaimana pendekatan itu harus partisipatori, melibatkan beneficiaries sejak awal, dalam proses development-nya, implementation maupun dalam kegiatan-kegiatan yang dirancang. Jadi itu yang pertama. Yang kedua, kita perlu mengidentifikasi champion atau fasilitator lokal sebagai pihak-pihak terdepan dalam mengimplementasikan kemitraan itu, partnership itu. Dan ini pengalaman kami cukup efektif untuk membuat program ini berjalan dengan baik. Yang ketiga adalah membangun mekanisme monitoring and evaluation yang partisipatori dan holistik, di mana mereka juga menjadi pihak yang mengevaluasi, dan dari private sektornya perlu melibatkan karyawan-karyawan sebagai pihak yang ikut juga mengevaluasi berjalannya program itu sendiri. Dalam pengalaman kami sendiri sebagai CSO, masyarakat sebagai beneficiaries, lalu kemudian private sector sebagai juga partner kami, dan government-nya sendiri itu sangat terlibat aktif di dalam proses ini. Jadi paling tidak ada 4 pihak itu duduk bersama untuk merancang apa yang harus dikerjakan dalam proses kegiatan itu. Jadi ini membuat kemitraan atau partnership itu menjadi lebih efektif, dan resultnya, outcome-nya itu akan bisa memberikan manfaat yang lebih terasa kepada beneficiaries dan juga kepada pemerintah daerah. Dalam satu hal ada kendala memang yang harus dipikirkan, khususnya di dalam kemitraan ini adalah bagaimana private sector juga mau membuka diri untuk membantu area-area atau memberikan juga value-value yang tidak terbatas kepada area-area lokasi dia bekerja. Itu sering terjadi menjadi kendala. Selalu mereka menggunakan istilah ring 1. Jadi kalau di daerah lain tidak. Padahal ketika dia membantu sebuah program di pemerintah daerah kan tidak bisa memilih rakyat mana yang harus disupport, harus punya keseluruhan. Itu beberapa catatan-catatan dari pengalaman kami, Bapak Ibu sekalian, semoga berkenan dan terima kasih buat Sagita.
Thank you so much Pak. Very insightful nih dari Pak Demaringan. Ini sudah dicatat juga dan memang ada beberapa hal yang sama sudah di-share juga. Participatory approach, pentingnya untuk share dari intervention ya Pak ya. Evaluation itu sangat penting juga. Mungkin saya akan mengundang satu dari Ibu. If you like to share your perspective, what do you recommend to government? Ini suatu menurut saya diskusinya sangat menarik dari tadi dari berbagai pihak. SO dari jadi ini bisa kita rekomendasikan nih kepada government, union, ini lebih efektif. Jadi silakan menyampaikan perannya, rekomendasinya. Saya bisa buka masih untuk saya sambil membaca apa yang sudah di-share. Dari Kim Better, beneficiary as communicator is a strong recommendation. It's also noted by Kim. Okay, perhaps if Saber is still with us, would you like to share your perspective of some recommendation how to enhance these partnerships? I'm not sure. I don't see him here. Is Saber still with us? Or sudah lipat. Okay, or perhaps someone from GIZ or mungkin dari Bappenas, dari timnya Bappenas, silakan juga jika ada belum ini. Silakan. Sepertinya sudah tidak ada masukan kembali. Oke, kalau begitu. Terima kasih kembali for your participation. This is such a fantastic discussion today we have on the Kampala Principles for Effective Development Cooperation Partnership and for sharing your inputs and experiences with us. A very special thank you to Bapak Nori Masashi Mamura, Dr. Uta Bolhov, Mr. Priyanto Rahmatullah, Bapak Junardi, Ibu Rita Triharyani, Steve Stipman, Ibu Maria Dian Nurani, Mr. Sabar Koduri for joining this action dialogue today. Last month, the Business Call to Action team also led a series of consultation on the application of the Kampala principles in Colombia and Tunisia to land the principles at a local level with government representative, development partners, civil society organizations, trade unions, and private sector actors. On March 24, we invite you to join us on our last community of practice session for one last peer-to-peer learning and experience, deep diving into the key themes included in the Kampala Principles, number 3 on inclusive partnership, and number 4 on transparency and accountability. You may register with the link that will be shared on the chat. As mentioned in the opening, based on the outputs from today's and the previous sessions, we will create a Kampala Principles guidance note detailing the opportunities, best practices, strategies, and examples for companies to implement the Kampala Principles in business practices in the context of development cooperation partnerships. The guidance note will also inform the Kampala Principle Toolkits that is currently being developed by the Private Sector Engagement Working Group of GPEDC under Germany's leadership and feed into the work on indicator framework to monitor the implementation of the Kampala Principles as part of the ongoing reform of the GPEDC monitoring framework. So again, everyone, as monitoring and evaluation has been shared quite intensely in this session, we know that your inputs today, your feedback today will strengthen the framework that we are being developed by the GPEDC in the currently that will be shared into their toolkit. So thank you very much again for your participations. To stay safe and healthy. And before we close our today discussion, our team would like to have a photo session together. So if you would like to open your camera, please do so. And we will have some several pictures together. Silakan dipandu dari tim. Bisa diberikan aba-abanya mungkin dari Mbak Erika atau Mbak Uli?
Okay, thank you everyone. If you want to take picture together, please open your camera. I will count to 3. 1, 2, 3. And we will have 3 more photos. Okay, 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. And the last one, 1, 2, 3. Thank you everyone for joining us. See you again.
Thank you everyone. Stay safe and healthy. Salam.
Thank you, Kim.
Terima kasih Pak Junardi.
Thank you,
Thank you,
Pak Sifri.
dear colleagues.
Thank you.
Pak Jun, terima kasih.